Chapter 11 is entitled Swayambhuva Manu Advises Dhruva Maharaj. And we're going to recite text 23 together, because that's what we have up on the board here at the temple. And then I'm going to skip ahead to text 28, which is the verse I was given. And I'm just going to double check that to make sure that I've got that right. But I'm pretty sure I checked, yeah, 11:28. So I'm going to read the purport to 11:28, and then I'll speak on that verse. And the class will go through till 8:30, and I'll try and stop in time for questions. Okay, I had some notes. I'm just going to bring those back up. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayet Nastapraishu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhagavati Naishtiki. Right, thank you, Guruji. Let's repeat. Avyaktasya aprameyasya nana shakti udayasya cha na vai chikirshitam tata kaha veda ata swabhavam avaktasya prameyasya nana shakti udayasya cha navai chikirshitam tata kovedata swa sambhavam avyaktasya prameyasya nana shakti udayasya cha navai chikirshitam tata kovedata swasambhavam avyaktasya prameyasya nana shakti udayasya cha navai chikirshitam tata kovedata swasambhavam. Someone like to repeat? Avyaktasya prameyasya nana shakti udayasya cha navai chikirshitam tata kovedata swasambhavam. Avyaktasya prameyasya nana shakti udayasya cha navai chikirshitam tata kovedata swasambhavam. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The absolute truth transcendence is never subject to the understanding of imperfect sensory endeavor, nor is he subject to direct experience. He is the master of varieties of energies, like the full material energy, and no one can understand his plans or actions. Therefore, it should be concluded that although he is the original cause of all causes, no one can know him by mental speculation. Useful shloka. Okay, now we're going to move across to text 28. So, I think you can repeat after me. Yaha, one who, Pancha, Varshaha, 5 years old, Jananim, mother, Tvam, you, Vihaya, leaving aside, Matuhu, of the mother, Sa, Patnyaha, of the co-wife, Vachasa, by the words, Bina, Marma, aggrieved at heart, Vanam, to the forest, Gataha, went, Tapasa, by austerity, Pratyak, Aksham, the Supreme Lord, Aradhya, worshipping, Lebhe, achieved, Murdni, on the top, Padam, the position, Trilokyaha, of the 3 worlds. Translation. My dear Dhruva, at the age of only 5 years, you were grievously afflicted by the words of your mother's co-wife, and you very boldly gave up the protection of your mother and went to the forest to engage in the yogic process for realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As a result of this, you have already achieved the topmost position in all the 3 worlds. Purple. Manu was very proud that Dhruva Maharaj was one of the descendants in his family, because at the age of only 5 years, Dhruva began meditating upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and within 6 months, he was able to see the Supreme Lord face to face. Factually, Dhruva Maharaj is the glory of the Manu dynasty, or the human family. The human family begins from Manu. The Sanskrit word for man is Manusya, which means descendant of Manu. Not only is Dhruva Maharaj the glory of the family of Swayambhuva Manu, but he is the glory of the entire human society. Because Dhruva Maharaj had already surrendered to the Supreme Godhead, he was especially requested not to do anything unbefitting a surrendered soul. Om Gyanatimanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Shtapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namni Gaura Tuje Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'll read the text again. My dear Dhruva, at the age of only 5 years, you were grievously afflicted by the words of your mother's co-wife, and you very boldly gave up the protection of your mother and went to the forest to engage in the yogic process for realization of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As a result of this, you have already achieved the topmost position in all the three worlds. So, when I was reading this purport just now to you all, a point that I was appreciating that I hadn't appreciated earlier when I read the verse and I was meditating on what to say for this class. So I think I'll start with that, which was that Srila Prabhupada's emphasis and kind of mood that comes through here and teaching highlights his extremely broad-minded and spiritual conception of reality, of knowledge, and he extends the appreciation of Manu, which he had for Dhruva Maharaj, not only to Swayambhuva Manu himself and his family lineage, but he highlights the point how Manu comes from Manusya, so he's the father of mankind. It reminds me of a class that I've listened to of Srila Prabhupada's, where I think he was in New York, if I remember rightly, and he was making the point to his disciples that who were all from America, and he was making the point that I'm reconnecting you with Vedic culture and Vedic knowledge, and that's a revolutionary concept from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that all living beings are eternal servants of Krishna, and even within human society, all races of humans and all all types of people originally are connected to lineages described in the Shastra. So we've heard from Bhagavatam how one example, not example, but one instance is kings that were banished by Parashuram and how they fled or were annihilated, and they went to various places across the planet. Mahabharata also describes how kings that were originally connected to Vedic culture and were followers of Vedic knowledge, followers of Sanatana Dharma, eternal religious principles, spread over the world. And Srila Prabhupada's point was that, in this lecture, was that he is reconnecting people that have lost contact with the Vedic knowledge with it. This is revolutionary in a sense, because due to the bodily concept of life and the influence of the bodily concept of life, which is the default for the conditioned soul, then Vedic knowledge and Vedic culture is bound by bodily designation to those that have connection with it. So, because I'm born in a Brahminical family, then I am a Brahmana. And as a Brahmana, then the rights to teach and also to practice the Vedic knowledge are bound to that class. But Shastra speaks differently to that concept, which is that the qualities of a person define their position. Narada Muni says, Yashala Lakshanam Praktam Pungso Varna Divyanjakam. So Yashala Lakshanam, that it's by qualities that a person's character and qualification is known. Yashala Lakshanam Praktam. Also in Mahabharata, there's this description where Bhima, he goes off and he goes a bit wild and he gets captured. I'm trying to recall it, it's not super clear, I haven't read it recently. But I believe Yudhisthira, if I'm remembering rightly, comes to save him. And anyway, there's some teachings there where he explains that actually, if the qualities of a Brahmana are seen in someone from another class, or even from someone who is born outside of the Varnashram Dharma institution, then by their qualities they should be accepted as such. Srila Prabhupada, in giving Krishna consciousness, spreading Krishna consciousness, Paschatya Desha Tarini, he traveled, crossed over, left India and brought the Vedic knowledge and gave it in its entirety to people in the West. And he received a lot of criticism for that. From within his own spiritual lineage, from within some of the members of the Gaudiya Mat, Srila Prabhupada's Spiritual Masters Institution, they felt that there were certain things that Srila Prabhupada did that were taking it too far. Not all, but some. So even within his own spiritual family, we could say, his own within the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada, then that criticism was there. And then certainly in the greater Gaudiya Vaishnava community, where hereditary lines of spiritual masters in some quarters of the greater Gaudiya Vaishnava community, those hereditary lines of spiritual masters are viewed as being traditional and authentic, and the only means of receiving Vaishnava initiation. And he experienced criticism from the greater Gaudiya Vaishnava community also. But nevertheless, Srila Prabhupada, as Tattvavid, a knower and embodiment of transcendental knowledge, spoke according to the Shastra, and in service to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who also spoke very strongly against the bodily concept of life and the consideration that external bodily identity is a consideration to be taken as higher than qualities. Yashala Lakshanam Praktam. He spoke against that very strongly. So, following the instructions, mood, and mission of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada distributed and introduced the Vedic knowledge, reintroduced the Vedic knowledge to all people, even giving Brahminical initiation, Brahma Gayatri mantra to people that were not born in Brahminical families. And he would support and defend his disciples very strongly whenever there was any criticism of them. So here Srila Prabhupada is saying that not only is Dhruva Maharaj the glory of the family of Swayambhuva Manu, but he is the glory of the entire human society. So this is also expressing Srila Prabhupada's understanding and mood that Vedic knowledge is for everyone, and that all human beings can benefit from it. And this reminds me that I'm learning some verses at the moment. It's always a good habit to learn shlokas. My spiritual master, His Holiness Srila Shivaram Swami Maharaj, often in class, when he gives class, he'll quote a verse and then he'll say, "Who knows this verse?" Then the devotees have to put their hand up whether you know the shloka or not. And then, so he's emphasizing you should learn the verses. Srila Prabhupada emphasized that to speak from the Shastra, you have to be able to quote the Shastra. You can't quote the Shastra. If what you're saying is not based on Shastra, then it can't be accepted. We don't make things up. We speak according to the Shastra. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says there's two things that you have to use to judge any statement. They're qualifiers. Is the statement Shastra Virud? Is it in line with the teachings of Shastra? Siddhanta Virud? Because there's different schools of Shastra, of Shastric knowledge, different darshans of Vedic knowledge. Commonly understood to be 6 darshans of the Vedic knowledge, 6 schools of Vedic knowledge, of which our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition is based on the Vedanta school of Vedic knowledge. And within Vedanta, there are prominent philosophies, and the word Siddhanta is important. So Siddhanta means perfect conclusions. That means Siddha, anta, an end that is perfect, a conclusion which is perfect. So that conclusion has been reached through a process by which it is clear that that conclusion is perfect. So in Vaishnavism, there are 4 main schools of Vedanta philosophy. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teaching is his school of Vedanta, and he explains Vedanta in his teachings to his disciples, and he converted many scholars and great personalities during his time to his philosophy and teachings. And so he explains that any statement that is made, and you can use this as a framework for qualifying any knowledge. Is it in line with Siddhanta? Is it Siddhanta Virud? Is it a statement that aligns with the Siddhanta? Or is it Apasiddhanta? Or is it something that doesn't align with the teachings of the Shastra, according to our school of Vedanta philosophy? And the other qualifying consideration is the statement, does the statement contain rasa vas? Does it conflict in the understanding of transcendental mellows? So these 2 things, is it rasa vas or apasiddhanta? So if it's not rasa vas and it's not apasiddhanta, then it can be accepted. So therefore, sadhakas, practicing devotees, they have a responsibility to be able to learn Siddhanta from the spiritual master and learn Rasa Tattva from the spiritual master in order to be able to identify what is correct and what is incorrect. That is, there's the onus, the responsibility on the disciple to do that. So therefore, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Tadvidi Pranipatina, there should always be submissive inquiry from the disciple to the guru. If there's no ongoing submissive inquiry on behalf of the spiritual aspirant, the sadhaka, then the sadhaka won't progressively advance in the teaching, won't be able to progressively access what the guru has to offer. So the guru is the representative of Krishna. Yashad, that's one of my verses here. That's good. Let me read it. The guru is Yasha Sakshat Bhagavati Jnana Deepa Pradeya Guru. The spiritual master should be considered to be directly the Supreme Lord. Why? Why should the spiritual master be considered to be directly the Supreme Lord? It's a very important statement. Yasha Sakshad Bhagavati. Yasha Sakshad Bhagavati. Sakshad means non-different, the same as. Yasha Sakshad Bhagavati. So why is Guru considered Bhagavan? Yasha Sakshad Bhagavati. Srila Prabhupada says the spiritual master should be considered to be directly the Supreme Lord. How's that? Because see, the Guru's looks like a human, he's born at some time he's also going to pass away, does all the same things as all the other human beings on the planet, eats, sleeps, does everything else. So how is it that the Guru is considered Yasya Shakshat Bhagavati, directly the Supreme Lord? Because he gives transcendental knowledge for enlightenment. So because the Guru speaks the instructions of Shastra as they're given by Krishna, which are non-different from Krishna. Krishna's Abhinatam Nama Namino, that Krishna's name and he are non-different. They're absolute. They're non-different. Krishna and his name are the same. It's Advaikyan. There's no difference between Krishna and his name. The name and the object are the same. It's not like a relative thing in the material world, like I say iPhone. Now the name iPhone and the phone are two different things. There's a name and the iPhone, they're not the same thing. But with transcendental objects, the name and the objects are the same because they are absolute objects, transcendental objects. So everything in this world is a reflection of reality. It's real, but it's a reflection. This is our philosophy, Siddhanta. It exists, but it's temporary. But it has a form, and it has a name. So it must be based on, it has reality. But where's the true form and the true name? If this is a temporary object, where's the real object? The real object is in Goloka, in Vaikuntha, in the transcendental realm. So our philosophy is a form of, in terms of like Western philosophy and schools, realism. We believe that objects are real. But the objects of this world are temporary, and they are a manifestation of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the external energy, which is a reflection of his internal energy, which is Swarup Shakti, the internal potency of Krishna. And in Krishna's internal energy, the objects are transcendental. So the object and its name are non-different. Abhinatam Namanamino. So knowledge spoken by Krishna is non-different from Krishna. Krishna's teachings in the Gita and Bhagavatam, the teachings of Krishna that are spoken by his eternal associates, those teachings are non-different than the objects that they are referring to. They are speaking the tattva of the spiritual objects. The tattva of an object is an inherent attribute of the object. It's non-different from the object. So the Guru speaks that which is non-different from Krishna. The Guru also acts according to that teaching. So his every action, thought, word, deed is a manifestation of that transcendental knowledge. Because they're acting on that knowledge, they're representing that knowledge in every action. So their actions are also that knowledge. They're also teaching by pracha, by their speech, and by their acha, by their practice. So they are a representation, they are non-different from that knowledge, which is non-different from Krishna. They are a manifestation of Krishna. You understand how the Guru is Sakshat Bhagavati. So the Guru is Sakshat Bhagavati. And therefore, the shloka continues. This is Bhagavatam 7, 15, 26. Chapter 7, chapter 15 of the 7th canto, very important, explains how through service to the spiritual master, then one can overcome all material conditioning, all anarthas, and attain perfection. And how service to Guru is everything. The shloka continues, consequently, for one who maintains the material conception that the spiritual master is an ordinary human being, everything is frustrated. So it's a conception. It's about the concept. It's of knowledge, understanding. His enlightenment and Vedic studies and knowledge are like the bathing of an elephant. So it becomes useless if you consider the Guru to be an ordinary human being. Ordinary human being doesn't act according to transcendental knowledge, doesn't embody transcendental knowledge, doesn't speak transcendental knowledge. It's just acting according to the modes of nature. It's fully under the influence of the material energy, not the spiritual energy. But the Mahatma, the spiritual master, Daivim Prakritim Ashritaha, he's completely sheltered by the internal potency of Krishna. How? Because he's acting according to Krishna's instructions. He's fully sheltered by Krishna. So, this is very important to understand the spiritual master, and that it's through hearing from Guru that we come in contact with Krishna and Krishna's service. And outside of Guru, there is no contact with Krishna and Krishna's service. Bhakti means Guru Bhakti. It's through connection with disciplic succession through the spiritual master that one connects with Krishna. And outside of that, there's no connection with Krishna. Outside of that, there's no connection with Krishna. Everything's one and different from Krishna. Everything is connected with Krishna in one sense. And Guru Tattva, Krishna manifests himself as Guru Tattva for the deliverance of the conditioned souls, for the increase of Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's pleasure. So Krishna manifests as Guru in many ways. Krishna gives knowledge to the conditioned souls by which they can come back to him in many, many ways. And any knowledge which supports the conditioned soul in coming closer to Krishna, anyone who, or anything that gives that knowledge is Guru. So Guru Tattva is very difficult to understand, actually. It's considered, Bhogavinda Maharaj, one of Srila Prabhupada's disciples, he would often mention, so it must be somewhere in Shastra or from our Goswami literature, somewhere from our Shastra, that Tattva of Lord Shiva, Shiva Tattva, and Guru Tattva, these two Tattvas are hard to understand, tricky. Guru Tattva particularly. It's very important to contemplate and to develop an understanding of Guru Tattva. So once one accepts Diksha from the spiritual master, then that is the means by which one renders service to Krishna. So when I say outside of the Guru, there is no connection with Krishna, I was thinking about from the perspective of a sadhaka who is initiated and is cultivating bhakti under the instructions of the Guru. And Rupa Goswami emphasizes that Ado Guru Ashraya. The first thing in cultivation of bhakti is to find Guru, Ado Guru Ashrayam. Because it is through spiritual master, through the disciplic succession, that one's bhakti devotion is directed to the Lord. This brings us to an important point in this class, which is about Dhruva Maharaj's behavior. So Dhruva Maharaj's behavior, this is why Manu has appeared. He's saying, you're not acting correctly. So the behavior of a Vaishnava is very important. Sadhu Bhushanam. Bhagavatam, I have the shloka here this is from Kapila Dev's instructions in 3rd canto. Very important shloka. Titikshva karunika surira sarvadehinam. Who knows this shloka? Anyone know this one, Titikshva karunika? This is a very important shloka. It describes the symptoms of a devotee, the qualities of a devotee. Titikshva karunika surira sarvadehinam ajata shatrava shanta sadhava sadhu bhushanam. So sadhu bhushana, bhushana means ornament, decoration. Sadhu bhushana. So the qualities of a devotee are his ornament. That is the behavior. Vaishnava behavior is the ornament of a devotee. So this verse from Bhagavatam highlights the main qualities of a Vaishnava. It says the symptoms of a sadhu means Vaishnava, are that he is tolerant, merciful, and friendly to all living entities. He has no enemies. He is peaceful. He abides by the scriptures, and all his characteristics are sublime. So you can know a thing by its qualities, characteristics. This is what philosophy is for, to be able to explain existence. What is existence? What are all of the objects of existence? So the Vedanta philosophy explains all existence. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his explanation of Vedanta, he explains that objects can be known by 2 qualities. This is very important. That is their primary characteristics or inherent characteristics, which is known as Swarup Lakshana, or their marginal characteristics, secondary characteristics, attributes, which are known as Tatashta Lakshana. So these two things defined by these 2 categories of attributes, objects are defined. Make sense? So every object has its primary attributes, inherent attributes, which define the object. And every object also has secondary characteristics. So common example is sugar, right? Sugar, the primary characteristic of sugar is sweetness. If there's no sweetness, you can't consider it sugar. It's something else, right? It can still be white. Sugar comes in a number of colors, but it can be white and some powder, granules. But it could be salt if it doesn't have sweetness, right? Or it could be flour if it doesn't have sweetness. So you can't take the inherent attribute of an object away. It's no longer that object when that inherent attribute is not there. So this is very important. Mahaprabhu takes the time to explain these points to whoever he instructs in Siddhanta. When he instructs Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when he instructs Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami. These teachings are very important because by them we can define objects and understand what existence is. So everything is known by its qualities. The inherent qualities of an object don't change. You don't get them later. The inherent attributes of objects are always there in an object. The swarup, lakshana of objects is there. They don't change, but the secondary attributes, they change. So in the example of sugar, sugar comes in a number of colors. So color is a secondary characteristic of the object sugar. It's not a primary characteristic. You can get brown sugar, white sugar, you can get soft sugar, the softness and hardness. The consistency is also a secondary quality. It's not a primary quality. Sugar can dissolve, right? So it can be a liquid, and it can also be a solid. So the form is also a secondary characteristic. But sweetness you can't take away. In the same way, any object that you identify, you can analyze according to that and identify what are its swarup lakshana and what are its tatashta lakshana. So objects of the spiritual world, they are of the swarup shakti. They always display their inherent characteristics. They are absolute. They're not different from their names and forms. But the objects of this world, they are manifestations of Krishna's external energy, Krishna's separated energy. They are separated from Krishna. And they're relative. They are different. Their name and form are different from them. But they are reflections of the real objects. So in behavior, a sadhu is known, a Vaishnava is known by their behavior. So Lord Chaitanya took the time to explain Vaishnava behavior to Sanatana Goswami because it's so important. And of all of the qualities of a Vaishnava, the primary quality is that he's surrendered to Krishna. So if that is there, then even if the devotee doesn't display all of the other qualities, they should be understood as a sadhu and respected as a sadhu. Krishna even goes as far in the Gita to say that even if they behave outside of what is expected from God's laws, from Dharma, then they should still be considered a sadhu. Apichetsu daracharo. Sudaracharo. But even if they do dura achar, dura is a negative prefix, it means like not good. Achar means action. So even if they do actions which are not good, because they're surrendered to Krishna, they're fixed in their determination to serve Krishna because they know that Krishna is the absolute, he is the absolute truth and the object of all existence and the object of my service. I am his eternal servant, and that by serving him, I fulfill all my responsibilities. And I therefore surrender to Krishna and follow his instructions. Because of that being surrendered, then in course of time, it should be known, Shastra says, that all of the other good qualities of a sadhu will come about in course of time. Because they're following the path of surrender to Krishna. So in course of time, all of the things which cause durachara, bad behavior, bad thoughts, bad words, then in course of time that will all go, and all that will be left is pure devotional service. So sadhus should never be criticized. In fact, no living being should be criticized. Because all living beings are displaying attributes of Krishna. Everything is a manifestation of Krishna's energy and of his own personal qualities. So criticism just comes from envy, which is a manifestation of one's own external identity, and pride, that is the sense of confidence, the false sense of confidence in an external identity. Actually, everything is a manifestation of Krishna and his own attributes. So one who has knowledge, who's fixed in knowledge of Krishna, It won't criticize anyone. So the Uttama Adhikari, one who's actually fixed in the absolute truth, doesn't even see any cause for criticism, because all they see is Krishna and Krishna's attributes and Krishna's qualities, because that's all that exists. That's reality. Because everything is just going on by Krishna's arrangement. Krishna's fulfilling the desires of all living beings, giving them exactly what they want, according to exactly what they deserve. Nothing more, nothing less. It's all going on by Krishna's arrangement. So what is there to criticize? It's Krishna. It's Krishna's sanction. It's either samasaveshu, he's not engaged with them because they're not interested, they're not turning to him, and they're just going on according to karma, and they're just getting exactly what they deserve, nothing more, nothing less. Or he is engaged with them. Yeyatamam prapadyante. People are surrendering according to their level of surrender, and he's reciprocating. So in either case, conditioned souls or sadhakas of various types, ultimately everything's going on by Krishna's arrangement. There's nothing outside of Krishna's arrangement. Not even a blade of grass can move without Krishna's sanction. Because existence is Krishna. If it exists, it's real. It means it's Krishna. Sat, existence, is Krishna. So everything is ultimately going on by Krishna's arrangement. So what is there to criticize? Now, Mahaprabhu also gives Sanatana Goswami instruction. You should explain the vidhi, the rules and regulations for Vaishnava conduct. You should explain how to function according. You should explain how to function as a devotee. He outlines what Sanatana Goswami should write about, which he does in Hari Bhakti Vilas. Hari Bhakti Vilas is for the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That's where we get all our rules and regulations of Dharma from, of Bhakti from. So there's categories of Dharma, there's categories of rules in Shastra. Bhakti, Paro Dharma. Varnashram Dharma is that which supports Bhakti in terms of how to conduct oneself based on external activities, how to align those so that they become favorable to Bhakti. So Mahaprabhu says that you should explain all of this, sadhachara. And we're supposed to cultivate it. Should follow it. When Sanatana Goswami arrived to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he had been in prison for about 8 months. Thank you, Prabhu. Yeah, that will help. He was in, thank you. He was in prison for a long time, about 8 months. And then he traveled from where he was in prison to where Lord Chaitanya was. Lord Chaitanya was staying at Chandrasekhar Acharya's house in Varanasi. And Sanatana Goswami was imprisoned in the capital of what was known as Gaudadesh, the kingdom of Hussain Shah. He had his capital. Where was that? I'm trying to remember. Maybe Raimuna. Anyway, that was where you can go to that prison. There's a place. Some devotees have gone there and for a parikram and taken photos. I've seen the picture of it's kind of like, looks like a bit of a mound with gates and prison. It's quite inconceivable that Sanatana Goswami was actually in prison, fully imprisoned, and he was in prison for 8 months. Sanatana Goswami, he's an incarnation of the Banga Manjari, the eternal associate of Radha and Krishna. This is what he went through. So Sanatana Goswami traveled to Mahaprabhu, and his life was endangered during that journey. And, he eventually arrived, but he was long-haired. He had a beard. He had dirty clothing, and it's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita that he was dirty. So when he arrived at Chandrasekhar Acharya's house, they didn't let him in. because of his appearance and how he looked. So then Mahaprabhu said, because Mahaprabhu is in everyone's heart. Ishvara Sarva Bhutana. So he knew that he was there. So then he said to Chandrasekhar Acharya, there's a Vaishnava at the door. And then Chandrasekhar went out and came back and said, no, there's just a Muslim mendicant, because he looked like a Muslim mendicant. So then Lord Chaitanya said, no, bring him in. So then he came in. And as he came in, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so filled with love for his eternal servant, Sanatana Goswami. Of course, Mahaprabhu is Lord Krishna. He has the mood and complexion of Srimati Radharani. So when he sees his eternal associate, Sanatana Goswami, his heart overflows with affection and love, and he embraces Sanatana Goswami. No consideration of his external situation. He embraces Sanatana Goswami, but then he instructs him. He says, please shave up. And they shave up, and he instructs Chandrasekhar Acharya to give him a dhoti. He uses the word dhoti, by the way. It's good to note that dhoti is Gaudiya Vaishnava dress. This is a dress that Mahaprabhu told Sanatana Goswami to wear dhoti. So, and then he asked him to shave up. Prabhupada's commentary, purport on that section, verse, is very good, you read it. It talks about the hippies and how we don't wear beards in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. In Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there's two standards. One is that you shave up. That's what Mahaprabhu instructed Sanatana Goswami. The other is that you don't shave at all. Prabhupada didn't emphasize that for his followers. He emphasized the other, that we shave up. So this is part of external sadachar. And then he later at that time he instructed Sanatana Goswami in Vaishnava sadachar, and he highlighted the importance of it because it supports bhakti. It supports the primary practice of bhakti, hearing and chanting about Krishna. The external identity of a devotee is that he's a Gora, servant of Lord Chaitanya, Gora Dasyam, service to Lord Chaitanya. So when a devotee takes initiation, they become the servant of Guru. Guru is the dear devotee of Lord Chaitanya, Gora Priyajana, the dear servant of Lord Chaitanya. So we don't serve Lord Chaitanya directly, we serve Lord Chaitanya through disciplic succession, through the Guru. But it's Gora Dasyam. That is the external identity to cultivate. Cultivate is an external identity. When you take Diksha, you're surrendering yourself to Guru. It means your body is the Guru's, becomes his. And by engagement in the service, then the body becomes spiritualized. Sanatana Goswami again gives the example of iron rod going into fire, becomes spiritualized. So this body born according to karma's external energy of Krishna. You engage it in Krishna's service by engaging your whole body, mind, and word in service to Guru, becomes spiritualized. It's a sadhaka deha, seva sadhaka rupena. Rupa Goswami Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Seva sadhaka rupena. This is the sadhaka rup. Jiva Goswami says that the present material body that the sadhaka has that engages in the service of the spiritual master is called a sadhaka rup. It's a spiritual body. But you've got to qualify what that means. It's not a spiritual body in terms of product of Swarup Shakti, like the eternal associates of Krishna in the spiritual world. We don't get into any. There are some apasampradayas that identify the external material body as spiritual and try to cultivate devotional mellows externally. That's apasiddhanta. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is Gora Dasyam, service to Lord Chaitanya through service to the spiritual master, by identifying that everything should be used in the Guru's service. This body is no longer my body. It's my spiritual master's body to be used in his service. Yeah. And my words I should speak in a way which is pleasing to my spiritual master, and I should learn to cultivate Mano Dharma, service to the spiritual master internally. That way, one is connected with Parampara, connected with Krishna. Daivim Prakritim Ashritaha, one is sheltered by the internal energy. And as one engages in that surrendered bhakti, one comes to the spiritual platform. And the body of the advanced sadhaka, Bhava Bhakta, is considered spiritualized. It's a spiritualized body. Fully surrendered Vaishnava's body is not considered material. It shouldn't be looked at as material because it's fully connected with Krishna's internal Shakti, internal energy. So the spiritual master's body is placed in samadhi. So these are some subtle points of our philosophy and Siddhanta. They're very important because as we start Krishna consciousness, Kanishta Adhika, Prakrita Bhakta is the description. It means we are externally identifying with the material body and mind more than we are with the spiritual energy, internal energy. So how do you become spiritually absorbed? Through service, through devotional service. So you need a spiritual identity for that. What is the spiritual identity of the sadhaka? Seva sadhaka rupena. This is you cultivate the identity as a servant of Guru. That is a positive spiritual identity to cultivate. It has substance. It's not a material identity. It's not something separate from Krishna. So Jiva Goswami says the sadhaka rupa is the present material body that the sadhaka uses to engage in Krishna's service. You have to cultivate that as a spiritual identity. This is my spiritual master's body to be used in his service. It's Krishna's energy. I should use it in Krishna's service. So therefore we apply tilak. We follow so many rules and regulations to govern our daily lives to maintain that consciousness. Yena tena prakarena mana Krishna nishevayat. One should fix his mind on Krishna by any means. Sarva vidi nishedha syu etayo eva kinkaraha. This is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, first wave, chapter 2, text 4. One should fix his mind on Krishna by any means. All the rules and prohibitions mentioned in the Shastras should be servants of this principle. So all of this sadhachar, everything, Vaishnava Dharma, is all about fixing the mind on Krishna. That's the purpose of all the rules and regulations. If we get into rules and regulations, Mana Krishna Nishevayat is not there. We're not Mana Krishna Niveshayat. Then it's external. It's not a waste of time. It's very beneficial. It will be purifying. But it's still not the point of it. The point is to fix the mind on Krishna from the very beginning of spiritual life. It's not, you don't wait to fix your mind on Krishna. All of the rules and regulations are to fix the mind on Krishna. They're to support that principle. Sadhana is mano dharma, the internal cultivation of remembrance of Krishna. Seva sadhaka rupena, siddha rupena chatrahi. It begins with service to the spiritual. It begins, middle, and end is service to the spiritual master. The external form is Gauradasya, how we engage in the service of Lord Chaitanya. As Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur says, to the degree that we engage and surrender to the service of Lord Chaitanya, to that same degree, we will develop attachment and attraction to the service of Radha and Krishna. Yatayata Gora Padara Vindeta Bhaktim Krita Punya Rasihi Tatat Sarpati Radi Akasmad Radha Padamboja Sudambu Rasihi. To the degree that we we engage in the service of Mahaprabhu, which means the service of Lord Chaitanya's dear devotees, which means the service of Lord Chaitanya's dear devotee, spiritual master who gives us diksha. To that degree, we also awaken attraction to the eternal service of Radha and Krishna. So, attachment to the lotus feet of the spiritual master is everything. And this mood of surrender to the instructions of the spiritual master is the essence of Vaishnava behavior, which we should cultivate. Understanding its importance in supporting our remembrance of the Lord. Okay, I'm going to finish there. As usual, I've gone slightly over time. Thank you for your kind attention. Online Vaishnavas, Hare Krishna. I don't know if anyone has any comments or questions. With all this technology, it would be good to see a bit more interaction, because I know that there's a means by which, people could ask questions, but I don't know, there might be questions out there. I don't know how you ask them if there are. Does anyone here have any comments or questions? Yes. I have a question. It's a little bit off topic. It's about Swami through papers in prison. We also hear that it's more or less he's conscious of that. He's never done what Krishna, but he also went through, for example, sometimes you hear his books next day is the one takes sannyasis and prays their situation. Yeah. Sister with her body, he's sad. So sometimes when I hear these things, I wonder, do these eternal associates, sometimes we hear that in the spirit side of the human experience. So they also, although they get Christian, they also have human experience in the sense that they feel living stresses are no longer a word, but they feel to some degree suffering that comes out of something. Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, so how do we understand what appears to be like a human experience in Nitya Parikara associates of the Lord? Yeah, because from one perspective, it seems like it's greatness. Yeah. Also, someone can say, well, maybe it's most of the kids. Yeah, so that's good. So the question, thank you for the question, it's good. The question is how to understand the experience of the eternal associates of the Lord when they seemingly go through human tribulations and difficulties, and at the same time, like I read a verse earlier that says we shouldn't look at the spiritual master materially. So how to understand that? Yeah, so there's definitely, my thoughts are that there's some points of the philosophy Siddhanta which you have to keep in mind when we're considering the eternal associates of the Lord. So one is that it's explained how just as Krishna's appearance, Jammakarma Chamidabhyam, is, he explains that Ajopi Shanavyaya Ishwaram, this verse from Gita, 4th chapter, he's explaining his appearance and how it's a manifestation of his own internal potency. So when the eternal associates of Krishna manifest in the material world, take birth in the material world, it's all going on by Krishna's internal potency. And they're always fully sheltered by Krishna's internal energy. So what appears to be the external energy is actually Krishna's direct hand. He's directly involved in their everything. He's fully in control of their situation. So it's not that they're experiencing karma or anything produced of material energy. It's all internal energy. That's, yeah, just same tattva that applies to Krishna. When Krishna manifests in the material world, that also applies to his eternal associates. Yeah. And the eternal associates are always absorbed in their loving relationship with Krishna. So in terms of their consciousness, they're always absorbed in loving service to Krishna on the transcendental platform. So at the same time, they are within the material world, preaching Krishna consciousness, giving Krishna consciousness to others. So they're very much able to feel compassion for the conditioned souls that are actually suffering under the tribulation of the material energy. And so their experience is different to that of the conditioned soul. So that should be kept in mind. Yeah. Now, to really know and experience what that is like, then you have to be like that. It's like anything. It's like anything. To know it, you have to experience it. You only know by experience. So, but when we hear transcendental knowledge, we should cultivate that and maintain that understanding. When we look, that's called Tattvadarshi, Shastra Chakshu. We should look through the eyes of Shastra. Based on what you've heard, you should look at them and should see them in that light. So no, we don't know what it's like to be an eternal associate of Krishna in the material world. And we won't know what that experience is like because it's a whole different tattva to what we're experiencing as what I'm experiencing as a conditioned soul coming into bhakti and trying to apply myself into bhakti. One explanation, that I've heard from my Guru Maharaj is that, like you hear how the acharyas, they lament about, like I'm thinking about Raghunath Das Goswami in the beginning of one of his prayers from Stavavali. He describes how he's in the ocean of material existence, suffering from lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, illusion. He's crying out for mercy. And my Guru Maharaj has explained how because they're in the material world and those are the symptoms of the material world, then because their prema, their love is so high, humility is a symptom of prema. It's an attribute of prema. So the more prema, the more humility. So the more love, the more humility. And the more love, the more compassion. So they speak out of great humility. They mean it. It's very authentic. They're not speaking out of integrity. They're speaking from their heart, but it's coming from a place of such high prema, such intense love, that they speak from such intense humility. So in this way, we can appreciate the conditioned soul. We can appreciate the difference between the conditioned souls and the eternal, the liberated souls. That's all I can really say about that. Yeah, nice question. Good to contemplate.
One verse I remember this connection.
Oh, thank you.
To summarize what you just said, it says that Vaishnava Kriya show Vaishnava's Kriya and actions and behaviors cannot be perceived with our intelligence. It's hard. So Vaishnava's behaviors and actions are hard.
Yeah, that's right. Vaishnava Kriya Mudra. What's the next part? Vigyam. Vigyam. Vijay. Na Bujai. Yeah. Na Bujai. So you can't understand it. Yeah. Vigya na Bujai. You can't understand it. Yeah. Kriya Mudra, their actions and their behaviors. Yeah. And also their form. Yeah. Their form. So shouldn't look at a Vaishnava externally. Shouldn't think, oh, this Vaishnava is because of some Rupa Goswami Upadeshamrita says that just like the waves of the water of the Ganga is always pure, should never consider any contamination. So similarly, in a Vaishnava, you should never consider material contamination. So you can't understand. That's right. You can't understand. So we shouldn't look externally. So Kanishta Adhika, Prakrita Bhakta, the natural kind of where it goes is external. So we have to check that with transcendental knowledge, and that's why we follow. That's why we follow Vaidhi Bhakti, and that's why we follow Shastra, because Shastra Praman is the means of acquiring true knowledge, not our own external our external perception. Yeah. Projection. Great. All right, I think we'll finish there. Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you for your kind attention. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna.